What would you do if someone judged your worth based on nothing but your clothes? For one undercover CEO, the answer changed everything. The dealership doors swung open and a man stepped in, a quiet figure dressed in a simple polo shirt and worn jeans. To anyone watching, he was just another customer, perhaps a middle-class worker shopping for a modest car. No one would guess that this man, Elijah Daniels, was the CEO of the entire dealership chain. Elijah wasn't there for a press appearance or a management review. He had decided to go undercover, blending into the crowd, to see firsthand how customers were treated at one of his flagship locations in Austin, Texas. His success wasn't handed to him. He had built his empire brick by brick, fueled by grit and an unwavering commitment to integrity. But he knew that success often masked the cracks in the foundation, and today he wanted to see those cracks up close. As he scanned the brightly lit showroom, sales staff hurried past him, chatting animatedly with better-dressed customers. No one stopped to greet him. Elijah didn't mind. In fact, he preferred it that way. He wanted the unfiltered experience. A grey sedan caught his eye. Practical, reliable, and completely different from the luxury cars he usually drove. He smiled faintly. Today, he wasn't the CEO. Today, he was just Elijah. But as he approached the counter to finalize the paperwork, something caught his attention. Behind him, two customers began a conversation that made his stomach tighten. Their words weren't just casual remarks. They carried a weight of prejudice, ignorance, and an air of entitlement. They had no idea the man they were talking about was standing just feet away. But Elijah wasn't ready to react just yet. He needed to hear more before deciding his next move. Elijah Daniels was no stranger to the whispers of doubt or the undercurrent of prejudice. Growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, he'd learned early on that success wasn't just handed to people like him. His parents, both teachers, had worked tirelessly to instill values of resilience and fairness in him. Those lessons carried him through decades of hard work, eventually turning him into a self-made multimillionaire and one of the most respected business leaders in the country. Yet, despite all his achievements, Elijah knew the world hadn't changed as much as he'd hoped. He often thought about the quiet stories he'd heard from customers, employees, and even friends. Stories about subtle biases, unspoken judgments, and the way people were often treated based on assumptions rather than truth. That's what had brought him here today. He didn't want reports or second-hand accounts anymore. He wanted to see for himself what was happening on the front lines of his business. The decision to go undercover had been a personal one. He'd stripped away the markers of his success, the tailored suits, the luxury watch, even the custom car that usually brought him to meetings. He parked his modest rental a block away, not wanting to draw attention. He wanted to experience what it felt like to be an ordinary customer, to sense the undercurrents of how people interacted with one another without the filters of status or authority. As he walked into the dealership, he felt a pang of nostalgia. It reminded him of the early days when he'd first started in the car business, selling cars straight off the lot, earning commissions by listening carefully to what customers needed. Back then, it had been about building trust, not pushing quotas. But now, staring at the sleek, polished showroom, Elijah wondered if that trust had been replaced by something else entirely. He noticed the staff immediately. A group of salespeople stood near the front desk, chatting among themselves. Their glances skimmed over him, landing instead on a well-dressed couple admiring a luxury SUV nearby. Elijah shrugged it off. He wasn't here for special treatment. He was here for the truth. But the truth had a way of showing itself when you least expected it, and Elijah was about to witness something that would test every ounce of his composure. Elijah moved toward the rows of gleaming cars, their polished exteriors reflecting the fluorescent lights above. The grey sedan he had spotted earlier sat in the corner of the showroom, its modest design blending into the background. It wasn't flashy, but that was exactly the point. He wanted to experience what an everyday customer might go through, someone not there to flaunt wealth or make a scene. A young salesman glanced his way, but quickly turned his attention to another customer, a man in a tailored suit admiring a convertible. Elijah paused, pretending to inspect the sedan while observing the dynamics around him. The atmosphere buzzed with small conversations, sales pitches, the hum of printers spitting out contracts, and the occasional laugh from a group of employees near the coffee machine. It didn't take long for Elijah to notice the hierarchy in play. The sales team seemed to prioritize customers who looked like they were ready to spend big. Those in casual attire, like himself, were largely ignored unless they actively sought help. It was a stark contrast to the values Elijah had built his business on. Every customer mattered, no matter how they looked or what car they were buying. Finally, a salesperson approached him. A young woman, likely in her 20s, with an overly rehearsed smile. "Looking for something specific today?" she asked, her tone polite but lacking genuine interest. Elijah responded casually, explaining he wanted to purchase the sedan. The interaction was brief and transactional. No attempt to upsell, no questions about his needs, and no effort to build rapport. As the salesperson walked away to process his paperwork, Elijah's focus shifted to the voices behind him. Two customers, a man and a woman, stood a few feet away, speaking in hushed tones that were still loud enough to carry. At first, their words seemed like idle chatter, but something about the tone made him listen closer. "She probably can't even afford it," the man said with a smirk. "Bet they'll run her credit, and she'll be out of here in 5 minutes." The woman laughed softly, adding, "You know how it is. Some people just like to play pretend." Elijah's heart tightened. At first, he thought they might be talking about someone else, but the subtle glances in his direction made it clear they were referring to him. Their words weren't just rude, they were laced with assumptions about who he was and what he could or couldn't afford. But Elijah didn't react right away. Instead, he stood still, letting their words sink in, unsure if silence was the right response, or if it was time to confront them head-on. Elijah remained in place, his eyes fixed on the sedan in front of him, but his ears were tuned to the conversation unfolding behind him. The man's voice carried a casual arrogance, the kind born from never having to question his place in the world. "People like that always aim low," the man said with a chuckle. "Probably doesn't even know what a down payment is." The woman chimed in, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Oh, don't be so harsh. Maybe he saved up for years to get something decent. Though, honestly, I doubt it." Elijah's fingers curled into his palm, his usually calm demeanor teetering under the weight of their words. He wasn't angry because they assumed he couldn't afford the car. He had nothing to prove to them. What stung was the deeper issue their words represented. The casual dismissal. The belief that they could measure someone's worth based on nothing but appearances. He glanced around the dealership, wondering if anyone else had noticed. But the staff were busy, and the other customers seemed absorbed in their own transactions. It struck him how easily moments like this could go unnoticed, dismissed as insignificant, even though they spoke volumes about the biases lurking just beneath the surface. The woman leaned closer to the man, whispering something Elijah couldn't catch, and they both laughed. He could feel his pulse quickening, a quiet storm brewing within him. Part of him wanted to turn around, to demand they explain themselves, but another part of him hesitated. What would it accomplish? Would it change their minds, or would it only confirm their biases? He took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was here. This wasn't about personal validation, it was about understanding. He had come to observe, to see his business through the eyes of everyday customers. And now he was seeing it, raw and unfiltered. But the decision to remain silent wasn't sitting well with him, and Elijah knew he couldn't just walk away without addressing what he'd heard. Elijah turned slowly, his movement measured, as if considering every step. The man and woman froze mid-conversation when they realized he was looking directly at them. Their smiles faltered, replaced by awkward half-smirks, as if they were unsure whether to be embarrassed or defensive. "Excuse me," Elijah said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable weight. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Were you talking about me?" The man blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, no. It was just general talk, you know." The woman, less composed, fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "We didn't mean anything by it, just joking around." Elijah stepped closer, keeping his tone steady. "I see. Funny how those jokes seem to always be at someone else's expense. Do you make assumptions like that often? Or is today a special occasion?" The man's face flushed. "Look, buddy, we didn't mean any harm. You're taking this the wrong way." Elijah held his gaze, unflinching. "No harm. Let me ask you something. What would you think if someone judged you by your appearance, made snap decisions about your character or your worth? Would you call that harmless?" The dealership had grown noticeably quieter. A few employees and customers had turned their attention to the exchange. The air felt heavier now, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone within earshot. The woman tried to laugh it off. "We were just talking. No need to make it a big deal." Elijah's expression softened, but his words were deliberate. "It's not just a big deal for me. It's a big deal for the next person you judge, the next person you dismiss, without knowing a thing about their story. You don't know who I am, what I've been through, or what I'm capable of. And the truth is, you don't need to. Every person deserves respect, whether they're buying a sedan or a sports car." The man shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Fine, we're sorry. Can we leave it at that?" Elijah nodded. "Apologies are a good start. But the real question is, will you do better next time? That's what really matters." As the pair awkwardly shuffled away, Elijah turned back to the counter. His heart was pounding now, the adrenaline catching up with him. He didn't like public confrontations, but sometimes silence wasn't an option. But the moment wasn't over yet. There was still a lesson to be shared, and Elijah knew his next move would matter just as much as the words he'd already spoken. As Elijah finalized the paperwork for the sedan, he noticed the subtle shift in the dealership's atmosphere. The staff, once oblivious to his presence, now seemed hyper-aware. Some glanced at him with curiosity, others with a flicker of embarrassment, as if wondering what they had missed. He didn't need to announce who he was. His words had already spoken volumes. The young woman handling his paperwork returned, her demeanor noticeably different. "Thank you for your patience, sir," she said, her tone softer now. "Your car will be ready shortly." Elijah nodded, offering her a polite smile. He wasn't there to single anyone out, but it was clear the ripple effects of the confrontation were spreading. Employees were whispering among themselves, and even the manager had stepped out of his office, scanning the floor as if trying to piece together what had happened. Once the transaction was complete, Elijah asked to speak with the manager. The man, a middle-aged professional with a practiced smile, approached quickly. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" Elijah gestured for a private conversation. "I'd like to discuss my experience here today," he began. Without revealing his identity, he shared his observations, the indifferent sales staff, the overheard conversation, and the importance of fostering an environment that treated every customer with dignity. The manager listened intently, nodding along. "Thank you for your feedback," he said. "We'll take your concerns seriously." Elijah gave a small, knowing smile. "I hope so. You see, I'm not just a customer. I'm Elijah Daniels, the CEO of this company." The manager's face drained of color. "Mr. Daniels, I had no idea you were here." "That's the point," Elijah replied calmly. "I came here as a regular customer to see how we're doing. And while there are things to be proud of, there's also a lot of room for improvement." He didn't raise his voice or issue ultimatums. Instead, he shared stories of his own journey, how he'd built the company on principles of respect and fairness, and how vital it was for every employee to embody those values. By the time the conversation ended, the manager wasn't just nodding out of obligation. He was listening, really listening. As Elijah walked out to his new car, he noticed the man and woman from earlier, standing near the parking lot. They avoided eye contact, but Elijah didn't need to say anything more. Their discomfort was evidence enough that his words had struck a chord. But Elijah knew the true test of change wasn't in a single confrontation. It was in the actions people took moving forward. As Elijah drove away in his new sedan, he replayed the day's events in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was for people to make assumptions, to let their biases shape the way they treated others. It wasn't just the two customers' remarks. It was the subtle indifference from some staff, the lack of attention given to those who didn't fit a certain mold. It was a reminder of how far society still had to go in treating everyone with respect and dignity. Elijah believed in accountability, but he also believed in growth. He didn't confront the customers or the manager to humiliate them. He did it because he knew that real change begins with awareness. Sometimes people needed a mirror held up to their actions to realize the impact they had on others. As he turned onto the highway, the sky stretching endlessly ahead of him, Elijah felt a quiet sense of purpose. He wasn't just running a business, he was shaping a culture where people like him, people who didn't always fit the world's expectations, could walk into a dealership or anywhere else and be treated with the respect they deserved. The lesson was clear. It's not enough to ignore bias or hope it goes away on its own. Change requires action, whether it's speaking up, creating policies, or simply treating others with the kindness and dignity you'd want for yourself. Every small step matters, because every step is part of a much larger journey. Before pulling into his driveway, Elijah recorded a quick voice memo for his executive team. "We need to revisit our customer service training," he said. "Make it personal. I want every employee to understand that every person who walks into our doors deserves to feel valued, no matter what they look like or what they're buying." He hit send and smiled. The day had been uncomfortable, even frustrating at times, but it had been worth it. He'd witnessed the cracks in the foundation firsthand, and now he could begin the work of fixing them. So the next time someone walks into one of his dealerships, whether they're in a suit or a t-shirt, they'll leave with more than just a car. They'll leave knowing they were seen, heard, and respected. And maybe, just maybe, those two customers would think twice before making assumptions about someone else. Stories like Elijah's remind us of the power of awareness, empathy, and leadership. If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of what truly matters.